What's up, guys? It's MB Boxing, and today I'm going to be predicting the outcome of Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin 3, and this is going to be a 12-rounder for the Undisputed WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF Super-Middleweight World Championship, and this fight is going to be Saturday, September 17th, from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, and this fight is going to be broadcasted on the DAZN pay-per-view. And to get both fighters' resumes, Canelo Alvarez, fighting out of Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, holds a record of 57 wins with 2 defeats and 2 draws, with 39 wins coming by way of knockout. He is currently ranked number 1 by BoxRec in the super-middleweight division, and to list all of the titles he has won and currently holds, obviously he's the current undisputed WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF Super-Middleweight World Champion. He's also the former WBA regular Super-Middleweight World Champion. He's the former WBO Light Heavyweight World Champion, former Unified WBC, WBA, and IBF Middleweight World Champion. He's also a former WBC Middleweight World title holder, and that was in a different reign than his Unified title reign. And he's also a former WBO Super Welterweight World Champion, as well as a former Unified WBC and WBA Super Welterweight World Champion. But to list the blemishes on his record, his losses, and his draws, he has a unanimous decision defeat to Dmitry Bivol in his last fight, actually, and that was a big upset. Many people, myself included, were picking Canelo Alvarez to win. He moved up in weight, and it really did show that Canelo isn't, impossible to beat, because he got outboxed, and he truly lost that fight to Dmitry Bivol with, no questions asked. But his other loss came by majority decision victory to Floyd Mayweather. That was years ago. I think it was in 2014, maybe. I might be getting the date wrong. It could have been in 2013. But it was somewhere around there when Canelo was much younger, less experienced. Floyd Mayweather beat him. Really, Floyd beat him 11-1. But, somehow one judge had it 6-6, which is just crazy. But, it goes down as a majority decision loss for Canelo against Floyd Mayweather, but it should have been a wide unanimous decision defeat. But to list both of his draws, he has a split decision draw to Gennady Golovkin in their first fight, and he also has a split decision draw back when he was 15 to 16 years old, back when he was my age, when he was fighting. And that came to Jorge Juarez. He also got a split decision draw, obviously, against, as I mentioned before. And that was in a 4-round fight, like I said, when he was a kid. So, you can't really... That fight really doesn't even matter. It's when he was, literally, as I mentioned before, in high school. But to list some of his best victories, he has a knockout win over Caleb Plant, a knockout win over Billy Joe Saunders, a unanimous decision victory over Callum Smith, a knockout win over Sergey Kovalev. He has a unanimous decision win over Daniel Jacobs, a majority decision win over Gennady Golovkin in their second fight. He also has a knockout win over Liam Smith, a knockout win over Amir Khan, a unanimous decision victory over Miguel Cotto. He also has a split decision win over Erislandy Lara, and he has a unanimous decision victory over Austin Trout. But again, his opponent's resume, Gennady Golovkin, known as Triple G. He's fighting out of Karaganda, Kazakhstan. He has an outstanding record of 42 wins with 1 loss and 1 draw, with 37 wins coming by way of knockout. He is currently ranked number 1 by BoxRec in the middleweight division. He's also the current WBA and IBF Unified Middleweight World Champion. He's also the former Unified WBC, WBA, and IBF Middleweight World Champion. But to list both of his blemishes, his loss and draw both came to the same man, as most of you guys know, to Canelo Alvarez, where, as I mentioned before, he obviously lost by majority decision in their second fight and got a split decision draw in their first fight. But to list some of his best victories, he has a knockout win over Ryota Murata, and that happened in April of 2022. He also has a unanimous decision victory over Sergey Derevyanchenko. He has a unanimous decision win over Daniel Jacobs, a knockout win over Kell Brook, and a knockout win over David Lemieux. So in my opinion, this fight is a very fun fight, obviously, considering it is the trilogy between two of the best fighters, anywhere from 160 to 168. Really, Gennady Golovkin has been reigning over the middleweight division for the past years. Canelo Alvarez now moving up to 168, trying to conquer other weight classes as well. This is Gennady Golovkin's first fight at 168. He did look very strong at the weigh-in, although he is 40 years old. Their last fight happened 4 years ago in September of 2018, I believe it was. And, that was back when Golovkin was 36, maybe 37. Depending on, I don't really know when Golovkin's birthday is, but it was somewhere around there. But, yeah, I mean, it's 4 years later. Golovkin is obviously, visibly, we've seen in his fights. I mean, I know I'm a big Golovkin fan. Golovkin is my favorite fighter, personally. But it's just obvious that he's obviously aging. I mean, we saw that in the Derevyanchenko fight. We saw that early against Murata. But as the fight went on against Murata, he really just established his sort of offense that he has always had in his power. And he was really starting to break down Murata as the fight went on and got a very, very solid win. He started the fight slow, but then as the fight went on, he looked phenomenal. But, yeah. Canelo Alvarez, obviously, since their last fight, I think he's gotten much better. I mean, I've heard some people say Canelo's gotten worse since then, which just makes no sense. Canelo Alvarez, his offense has really stayed the same, except maybe his counter-punching has gotten better. But his timing as well is very solid. His accuracy is better. I mean, overall, he's just gotten much better as a fighter, and especially in his defense. Against Gennady Golovkin in their first fight, or in their first two fights, he just looked a bit flat-footed as opposed to now. Nowadays, he's a bit more loose, has much better upper body movement, and when he gets hit, it's not really that often, to be 100% honest nowadays. But against Dimitri Bivol, who is a much taller man than Golovkin and who has a much different style, he was getting tagged a bit on the outside, tattooed with shots and whatnot. But Golovkin doesn't fight like that. Golovkin has a completely opposite style to Dimitri Bivol. He's smaller than Bivol. He's obviously shorter, has a shorter reach, and he comes forward, Golovkin does. But in their first and second fight, I mean, it was really fought where both men were having some, like, strengths where they're coming forward, where they're backing up. Like, both of them have styles that normally, considering that they're really the best fighters in the world, they're normally the guy that comes forward on their opponent. But the thing is, I know many people agree with this, but I had the first two fights scored in favor of Gennady Golovkin. I believe I scored both of them 116 to 112 for Golovkin. Maybe the second one I might have had at 115, 113 for Golovkin. But still, the second fight was definitely closer, but the first fight was 100% clear for Golovkin. But, yeah, nowadays, I'm going to be 100% honest. I just think it's going to be very hard for the judges to give Golovkin a decision if it's a close fight. The thing is, I'm imagining this fight to be pretty competitive, obviously, but Canelo's gotten much better since then, and Triple G has gotten significantly worse. We've seen him hurt a bit in the past few years. Since the second Canelo fight, we saw him get hurt to the body by Derevyanchenko, and it was sort of on the run in that fight a bit, and that was a very, very close fight that I think could have went either way. But, I mean, Canelo Alvarez obviously is a great power puncher, and he's been working on, over these past few years, his left hook to the body, and it's proven to be one of his biggest punches. He's was able to land it multiple times in his past couple fights, obviously, except against Dimitri Bivol, who completely outboxed him. But, I mean, now I think that with Triple G, who's really more of a stationary target than Dimitri Bivol, I think that he'll have much more success compared to his last fight and his fights against Triple G in the past in this one. So, yeah, obviously you could tell by this, I think you guys can infer that I'm going to be picking Canelo Alvarez to win, and that's who I'm going to be picking. I mean, Canelo Alvarez has gotten better over these past few years. I mean, right now I would say he's in his prime, really. But as for Golovkin, I mean, he's 40 years old. I mean, he's really hitting middle age now. He's gotten a bit worse, obviously, over these past few years. He's starting to get hit a bit more. His offense isn't as sharp and snappy. I mean, his punches, although they do carry the same very good power, which he does have, we do have to mention he has some of the biggest power in the middleweight division, or the biggest power, actually. And although I really do love Golovkin and how he fights, and he's my favorite fighter, I'm going to be 100% honest, as I mentioned earlier, I just think that Canelo Alvarez, like, just realistically, has just gotten much better over these few years. Although he's coming off a loss, I think that's going to motivate him even more to get a very solid performance in this fight. And I think, although it will be competitive and close, I think it will be nodded in favor of Canelo Alvarez. Like I said before, I just don't even think the judges can even give Gennady Golovkin a decision, even if he definitively wins. Because, one, he's 40 years old now, and two, I mean, in the past two fights, they gave him really bad decisions. You know, I mean, that's just the thing. I mean, nowadays, with Canelo, who's in his prime, selling every single fight, getting everyone watching it, and then now with a 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin, and they wouldn't even give a 36-year-old Golovkin the decision or a 35-year-old Golovkin the decision. I mean, that's just bogus. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's why I don't think Triple G has a chance to win this fight on points. I mean, obviously he does if he wins like super wide. If it's remotely a competitive fight, I just don't see the judges giving it in Golovkin's favor. I mean, based off of the first two fights and the scoring in those ones, it's not like just one. It's not like just like the first fight had bad scoring. I mean, the second one did as well. I know some people say, oh, Canelo could have won the second fight. Although it was close and competitive, I thought it was just clear for Golovkin to win. Same with the first fight, obviously. But here, I just hope the judging is on par with, I mean, just good judging. I just hope we see good judging if it does happen to go the distance. And let's say Triple G does win on most people's scorecards. I just hope that the judges could give it to him because they gave him sort of sour decisions in his past two fights with Canelo. But how I see this fight going down, I mean, really, it's 11 minutes in, and I haven't even broken down the fight yet. But as I mentioned before, I think Canelo Alvarez will win this fight. But I think it will be very, very interesting. I think that the first couple rounds will be very, very hard fought. I think that Gennady Golovkin will utilize his jab. He does have one of the best jabs in the middleweight division around there from 160 to 168. But we do have to remember Canelo Alvarez is sort of beefed up at 168 and sort of established there fighting these bigger and really just physically stronger guys. Although Golovkin does have more power than the guys that Canelo has been facing in his fights at 168, he's just not as physically strong considering he is smaller. I believe that Golovkin is like 5'10", and hasn't fought at 168. Canelo Alvarez, obviously, I think he's like 5'7", 5'8", but he's just sort of established fighting these tall guys, these lengthy guys, these big guys like Kovalev, like even Bivol in his last fight. He lost, but Bivol's a big guy. He also fought Callum Smith, who's a very tall guy, and Caleb Plant. I mean, you know, all these guys are very, very big. But, yeah, I just think that Canelo Alvarez early on will try to establish his own front foot in the fight. He'll try to use his physicality over Golovkin. I think he'll come forward a lot in the first few rounds. He might try and counter a bit on the outside like the first and second fight. He was sort of most of the time, although they both traded who's like being the dominator in the action. I think that in this fight, Canelo Alvarez early might start out coming forward a bit. Golovkin might try and take a page from Bivol's book and try to land some counter jabs on the outside and try to outpoint Canelo in those earlier rounds. But, yeah, after 4, it could be 38-38, to be 100% honest. It could be 39-37 for Canelo. It could be something like that. Like, I could see some of the rounds being very close, but they might be edged a bit in favor of Canelo Alvarez. So after 4 rounds, it could be 39-37 or 38-38, respectively. So then from rounds like 5 to let's say rounds, let's just say from rounds 5 to round 6, I think that Golovkin will start to come forward a bit more, but that will just sort of leave him open to getting hit with more shots from Canelo Alvarez, obviously. And I think that Canelo, being that he's become much more of a better accurate and much more of a better accurate puncher and much better counter puncher, I think he'll start to land bigger and better shots on Golovkin, and he'll start to just outwork Golovkin in those rounds. So let's say after 6 rounds, Golovkin could be down 58-56 on Canelo. It could be 59-55, who knows. But, yeah, then in the second half, I think that actually Golovkin will start to pick it up a bit more. I think he'll realize that his work earlier on with the jab will start to pay dividends, and I think he'll start to utilize the jab even more in this fight. And in the second half, from let's say round 7 through 9 could be rounds that Triple G could edge. Not like all 3 of them, but those could be rounds that he has much more success in than like rounds 5 and 6. He'll start to use the jab more, come forward a bit on Canelo, and just be smarter with his action, because I think in rounds 5 and 6 he will see that what he needs to work on is how he delivers his shots coming forward, and I think that's what will happen. I think from rounds 7 through 9, Golovkin could edge them. So let's say like it goes past 8 rounds, it could be 77-75 for Canelo, maybe 78-74, and let's say, yeah, like somewhere around there, 78-74, 77-75, or 78-74 for Canelo Alvarez after 8 rounds. So like I said, that 9th round could go to Gennady Golovkin as well, but I think in round number 10, Canelo Alvarez, it will be a close round, but I think that Canelo will maybe make it a bit more competitive than like from round 7 through 9. He might start to just realize that where he could counter his jab, where he could go to the body if Triple G's going upstairs, coming forward. he'll start to utilize that a bit more in his corner and whatnot. So, I mean, round 10 could be a toss-up. Could go either way. That's another round that could be sort of a swing. But, yeah, I could definitely see it going either way, those later rounds. But then, like, from rounds 11 and 12, those are also rounds. Like, one of them, I think that round 12, I think Canelo will try to push out as much offense as he can. And I think that he'll really try and really close the show. Not in a sense trying to get a knockout, but trying to close it well in the judge's eyes. So I think that Canelo will go round 12. And I also think that round 11 will be a very, very close round that could go either way. So after tallying up those rounds, it could be anywhere from 116, 112, or 115, 113 for Canelo Alvarez. I think it's going to be somewhere around there. Anywhere from those scorecards could happen. But being that the judges are obviously more favorable in Canelo Alvarez, like I could definitely see one judge having it 117, 111 for Canelo Alvarez. But that's just like how the judges could have it with boxing politics in effect. But I mean, realistically, I feel like this fight will be, just from a fan's perspective, an unbiased perspective watching the fight, it could be anywhere from 116 to 112 to 115 to 113 for Canelo Alvarez. So comment down below your thoughts on this very, very big fight. It's one of the biggest fights of 2022. Even though Triple G is 4-0 and Canelo's coming off a loss, it's still one of the biggest fights. Still one of the biggest fights, and it's between the number one at middleweight, the number one at super middleweight. Their rivalry coming together for a third fight, so it's still very big. Like I said, comment down below who you think is going to win, and by what method. By knockout, decision. I've been seeing some people picking Triple G to lose by knockout. I think that's a very interesting pick, but, I mean, yeah, anything can happen. This is boxing. So, yeah, overall, I believe that Canelo Alvarez will defeat Gennady Golovkin in their third fight, and I think that he will get a unanimous decision victory. And I think that the judges will score this bout 116 to 112 twice probably, and maybe 115 to 113. So somewhere around there, 8-4 to 7-5 for Canelo Alvarez. And yeah, that's really it. I'm MB Boxing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.